Welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And here we are, episode 57 for the 40th anniversary of John Carpenter's The Thing.
So, as always, thank you for tuning in, and thank you for all of the ratings and subscribing and all of that. Just a reminder to subscribe if you haven't. And interestingly, Spotify now allow you to do reviews. So if you listen on Spotify, please consider dropping us a review. It always helps us out. So I've got that little spiel.
Always adds that little socials. Yeah, get those in. Yes. Here we are with The Thing on its 40th anniversary. Now, this is a film that obviously, since whenever you do a horror podcast, I think The Thing would always come up pretty quickly into your mind. And we've been talking about this episode in different variations of the way we would do it for a while. We started for a long time, we were going to do like a comparison one, earlier on when it was like this versus this, the what we'd call the original versus the remake, basically, of what we've got here, The Thing from Another World.
Yeah.
The original, I'm blanking on the name of the director for that one. It came into my head and it just went away. I'll come back to that in a minute. But anyway, you've got the two different films, and we thought we'd do a comparison of that originally, and we moved away a little bit from trying to do more than one film in an episode because it was just, we've always found it overloaded.
Yeah, definitely.
We had too much in there, and that led to the time. Talking about another John Carpenter-led franchise, like when we did Halloween and we had 2.5 hour episodes to try and fill in several films at once instead of that.
That was fun.
It's a great retrospective. Go and check out a Halloween retrospective. There's a lot in there, but
it's a hefty listen.
But it's a hefty listen. Yeah. You'd have to be willing to break it up over time.
And I think
good for a long journey.
Yeah. We were also thinking of doing, because obviously I think the first and maybe only remake versus original we did was My Bloody Valentine. And we were, like you said, we were thinking of doing kind of looking at maybe the 1950s, Who Goes There, and then, John Carpenter's The Thing. But we were also thinking, do we maybe throw in the 2011 The Thing as well? Because it kind of serves as a
prequel. It's a prequel, isn't it?
It's a prequel, but it very much feels just like a remake, even though the first time I watched it, I assumed it was a remake until the end. So I think it does kind of serve as that. And like you were saying, a lot of the times when people do kind of discuss The Thing, they speak about it as one of the, if not the best remake of all time. But I think it's probably so far removed from the original, Who Goes There.
It is very different from the original film. Anyway, it's bordering on the idea that it's not even a remake, almost, in how different the story elements almost kind of are. Yes, the original was like almost more like a UFO. It's this big creature that comes in. Yeah. The body horror, obviously, and stuff like that, completely different for the time kind of thing. Theirs was much more your classic Universal monster. Like, here's a big monster that's kind of coming in kind of thing. The Antarctica, people stuck in a base, was kind of true. But that was most of the film, whereas this film is very different. This is much more of a psychological kind of slow burn kind of...
Yeah, it's definitely a
body horror, kind of full-on horror, you know what I mean? Whereas the original almost still fell in that kind of slight, kind of more like an adventure kind of thing. Like, there's a bunch of soldiers on an adventure, and suddenly there's something to escape, and they're stuck in a room, and what's on the other side of the door, and a bit more of that. So it's not, it's definitely not what I would call a remake in that way. I'd say John Carpenter had a very kind of different vision with how to take this film. Whereas, let's say, like the one that was the 2011 one is almost, this is the problem that people have is, and it's not even that that's necessarily a bad one in a way. It's well made, and it looks nice. But the problem was it didn't feel like anything else happened, which was weird, because you've basically given them a prequel where it feels like, oh, so before Kurt Russell's group did this, Some other group basically did the exact same thing in a different base.
Yeah.
And like there were so many ways to take the thing. It's just weird that they went with, let's basically do a prequel, but it's a remake, basically. It's basically a prequel remake of the same film, but with Mary Elizabeth Winstead instead.
Yeah.
As like Kurt Russell's character kind of thing, but not like quite the same. But that's basically it. And then the only point you have is where we started this film, which is the dog. The thing got the dog.
Yeah.
And then we see the dog go off. We're like, now we know how it connects to the next one. And we see the people in the helicopter going after. I think you see the helicopter go off, and it's like, okay. So we've basically just made a film to explain how the dog became the thing. That's basically what you take from that film, or who the people on the helicopter were.
Yeah. Which
is something that never needed to be done, because it's kind of part of the mystery of that amazing opening shot where you've got that helicopter in the 1982 thing where you've got them going over the top and you've got that dog going through the snow. It's such an awesome shot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when was the first time you ever watched The Thing? Do you remember?
I didn't. I only saw it properly for the first time a few years ago. Okay. I'd never watched. I'd seen parts of it before, and I'd heard about it, and I knew certain parts of it, but I'd never seen it until I don't even know. I feel like it's less than 10 years ago that I saw it for the first time. I know I watched it once. I think I've only watched it fully all the way through properly twice.
Yeah.
I saw it years ago, I think when I was in university, I think I must have seen it. And then I watched it about 6 months ago, I think, when it was on TV. And I just started watching it. And Charlotte was watching it as well. And at first I was like, I don't know if you're going to like this, but she seemed to be properly into it. She was properly drawn in, because yes, the body horror is something. I don't know what happened there. My voice went some kind of accent. The body horror is like something else. But there is just a part of the story where it kind of does draw you in, the whole like mystery that's kind of left, the whole kind of tension between them. It really does kind of draw you in. It's all quite, although I said like a slow burn in some ways, because it's not like lots of things happen in a way. Like a lot of things is like a couple of key set pieces, but you're never not paying attention. You're constantly like, right, what's going to come up? What's coming? It's that classic Carpenter tension and suspense that is throughout it, and the soundtrack that goes with it to just build. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a beautiful film.
How about you?
Funnily enough, the first interaction I had with The Thing was actually, I think it was on Xbox back when they made
the game.
Yes, they made a game set after with I can't remember if McCready was in it or not, but they made a game after, and I remember kind of playing it and kind of not really like getting it, to be honest, not really knowing about it, but I do remember shortly after that kind of tracking the film down and watching it. And even though I played the game, and so I kind of knew it was aliens and I knew it could infect people, I didn't really, I hadn't seen any of the, the key scenes or anything like that. So I kind of went into it very, very fresh.
Yeah.
And I remember kind of watching it, or I think I just downloaded it one night and I loved it, it was one of the first Carpenter ones I watched. Obviously, I think Halloween being the first.
Yeah.
But it became one of my, my favorites of his. And I think, like you said, the thing that I remember thinking, and I always forget this every time, is the opening scene with the spaceship, when it's just kind of going through space and then lands on Earth. I always forget that for some reason. I just remember it.
I've completely forgot what part's that. I don't remember that part off the top of my head.
Yeah,
I watched it last time, I don't remember that bit. Maybe I missed the start.
Maybe, but there's just this.
It's a bit on the spaceship.
I don't know whether I watched like some extended edition or something like that, but there's a scene where it's a spaceship going down and crashing on Earth.
Is there?
Yeah.
Oh, right. I literally thought. Yeah, I thought it was literally. And I've got a synopsis, and it starts literally in Antarctica. A helicopter pursues a sledge dog to an American research station. That's the first bit I remember.
Maybe I'm the only person who's ever seen the scene. Maybe it's been some kind of hallucination. But it opens up with this scene, because then it kind of just goes then straight away into.
Yeah, I literally don't think I've ever seen a scene like that in this film.
Yeah,
maybe you have seen some cut of it.
It's a very quick cut. It's not.
Is it? Maybe it is in there. It's just not like one of those things they'd mention because it's such a quick shot.
Well, it's not mentioned. It's just a quick thing. You know?
I don't remember that scene at all off the top of my head.
Yeah.
As I said, the last time I watched it, I haven't watched it fresh for this because I felt like I'd watched it so long ago, so I thought it was fresh in my mind, and now I'm questioning myself.
Yeah, you are.
I'm now sat here like, what?
This
way, am I real? Need to test my blood.
Yeah, but it opens up quite coolly, and then we go into we get that classic kind of score, which I think was interestingly Ennio Morricone did a piece of it for it. So I think he actually does the opening theme. I know John Carpenter does extra additional stuff, but it kind of sets itself apart by having John Carpenter not do the theme. But it's a great kind of soundtrack and a great opening score. But it's so kind of minimalistic and bleak that it kind of sets the tone perfectly. And then obviously we get the scene where the helicopter pilot is chasing down the scoundrel dog, which I didn't know this until recently, but obviously he's Norwegian, and there's no Norwegian subtitles in it, but he's shouting something as he's trying to shoot
from the helicopter. Oh yeah. I have heard this before, but I can't remember what it was.
It kind of roughly translates to get the hell away. It's not a dog. It's some sort of thing. It's imitating a dog. It isn't real. Get away, you idiots. Which is quite interesting because it gives away the whole thing of the film within the first kind of 5 minutes. But again, if you didn't know, it would go amiss.
Yeah, definitely. No, you wouldn't know but also because he doesn't go to subtitle it or anything. No, it doesn't. He just in that kind of way, and Carpenter is quite a minimum. It's weird to say in a film with the special effects of such crazy level of not minimalist, but everything else normally about character, about setting, about scenery, he doesn't like to overdo it. He does like to keep it quite simple, straightforward. Like the shot is pretty much kind of that kind of spanning kind of shot you're getting cut between the dog and the helicopter kind of thing. But it just, and as you said, like the music, it just gives that kind of, it's weird because the music is, it has that class, it does have that like classic Carpenter kind of, that kind of as if it sounds like it's coming off I don't know, I'm trying to think of what the machine I'm thinking of, a kind of 80s kind of, it sounds like it's coming off an 80s electronic keyboard or something that kind of, or that kind of weird, but it has that also kind of, the music in this reminded me quite a bit of Assault on Precinct 13 that he'd done before, which was much more matched the kind of the crime kind of thriller kind of music. And there was something about that in this score, like for me, that made me think of that kind of down that kind of kind of like music that goes through. I mean, John Carpenter, yes, very musical me. But no, it's such an effective start because you literally have no clue what's going on. It feels like you're coming midway through a scene. Which you are, but it literally feels like you're in the middle of something happening, and literally, so it is one of those. Like, I'm actually almost certain that I once went to watch this film when I was younger, and I think I literally was watching the scene with the dog and being like, "What's going on?" So I'd watched like a part of the opening, but I thought I was already midway through the film, so I think I didn't keep watching it because I think I skipped past the channel because I was like, it's already must have. It must be most of the way into the film. I don't know where this dog's come from, kind of thing. That's what I remember doing when I had when I used to watch TV. I remember the part of the reason I only watched Halloween the first time watching it on TV was because I literally turned on just as it was on BBC and it said the classic Halloween, and then it started. I was like, I'm here at the start of it. Whereas I used to always be on my TV if I clicked onto a film, unless it's a film I'd already seen. If I clicked onto it, sometimes I'd watch it for a second, but I'd never commit to it because I'm like, I'm not at the start of the film.
Yeah, no.
So I wouldn't commit to it. These are the days before we had like a Sky Plus or streaming or any of that. This was just young boy watching his TV at night.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I never...
While some stranger in a corner rubs his nipple. That's what it sounded like. It sounded wrong the way I said young boy.
I remember like
just flicking through channels.
yeah, that's it. Or getting the guide up and thinking like,
what's up?
This film starts at 9 o'clock, so I need to, at like 10 to 9, I'm going to go downstairs, make food and get drinks ready,
so that I'm ready for this. This is the world that you'll never understand out there. If you are younger, if you are but a few years younger, you probably don't understand these concepts. That yes, you had to be prepared for yourself, and you would be so pissed off if for some reason someone like you got distracted by something. There'll be like I don't know, something in the house happened, or someone knocks on the door, or I don't know, some random mates knocked on the door to like speak to you for like a couple of 10, 20 minutes, and you're like that, and then you walk around and go, oh fuck, it's 10 minutes into the film. It's ruined. I can't do it now. It's done. Like I'm not watching it unless I got to the start. Back to the film. It's an interesting, like I was looking before, because it is interesting with this film because, like you said, it is deemed as one of, if not one of the greatest remake of all time. It's now deemed like this, and people now see it as such an amazing, like, look at that film. How could you not think that those special effects were absolutely incredible? And how could you not look at that and go, look at the achievement? Like, how did they create that? I still look at the effects in here and go, yes, I know it's a practical effect. I know it's not real, because I can't say anymore that the way you change it looks 100% real in my mind. That doesn't mean it doesn't look fucking incredible. When you're looking at some of the effects in this film, you're like, oh my God. But the weird thing to say, like looking here, is the fact that the film, released obviously in 1982, the budget's 15 million and it only made 19.6.
Yeah. And
it wasn't like a worldwide hit. It didn't really get huge releases in other countries. I think in the UK, I think it was on that border of the whole, the video nasty kind of, oh, we're not sure if this is appropriate kind of thing because of the content in the film. And 19.6 to have like that low, you think, holy shit, like you think of this film and then you think, oh my God, you'd expect it to be like that it was a huge hit.
Yeah.
Classic. But apparently it was the a thing of the time that we were getting more Spielberg.
Yeah.
To reference our last Poltergeist episode, this kind of family friendly, and we had E.T. and they had the competition from E.T. where lots of people had just seen E.T. and it was a different approach to sci-fi. Before, like quite often sci-fi had been all about what's that creepy creature, or what's that coming out, an alien, or like something like that. There'd been a lot of that kind of thing. There hadn't been a lot of the ETs like, this is a nice character coming out.
Not so much, especially not interacting with Earth, because obviously you would have had, by the time this came out, you would have had Star Wars being out.
Yeah.
And Star Trek was obviously going. So it was a lot different. You didn't have, I mean, they were more like adventure films as opposed to having that family-friendly kind of positive
feel. The sci-fi, it was still, it was still more light-hearted in a way, like a sci-fi. Yeah, but they didn't, well, obviously, we know that it was a competitor. Like, E.T. was like, literally, like, if you inflated it for today, E.T. was like a mega hit. It was like it was like a Marvel studio style kind of, that much money it would have made kind of thing. Like if it was released today and had that much popularity, it was like the biggest film in the world for a long time kind of thing. Yeah. The biggest film ever made for a long time. So you understand why people looked at it, but so because there'd been this whenever something newer comes in and it's a slightly different approach, people look at it like, oh, that's amazing. And there always seems to be the point when people look at films that are still just staying with, maybe a more standard approach in some ways, not this film necessarily in some of the effects ways it goes about, but the more standard kind of sci-fi horror approach. And for whatever reason, people completely ripped this film apart.
Well, I mean, it's very nihilistic, isn't it? It's a bleak film. Whilst we do have, amazing special effects and stuff like that, and great elements of tension, there are there's a human element about the film which isn't kind of spoken about as much. A lot of people talk about or if you mention the Thing to people, a lot of people are going to think about, the spider head, the
chest
busters.
Oh, no, that's the
not chest buster.
That's
the defibrillator.
The opening chest, not so much the chest. That's chest busters, ain't it?
Yeah, chest busters. But yeah, you've got to think about the more kind of visual effect stuff. You're not going to think as much of the kind of human element about the film, of the mistrust, of all of this kind of ideas of not being able to trust them, not even being able to trust yourself.
Yeah.
This time I watched The Thing, and kind of reading a bit more about it. One of the things that is true, it was really kind of scary for me, was that the whole time I'd watched this before, I was under the impression that once somebody is assimilated, they know that they're assimilated.
Yeah.
Whereas in the actuality, or from my understanding, is they don't know that they're assimilated until it's time for everybody to know,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I get that. Yeah. I get that within the way the characters react, the fact that they're so adverse, the idea that they're trying to hold on to their humanity. They are like fighting really much to stay onto it, but it does tend to be, you tend to notice that the change happens with them tends to be in major moments of like crisis or peril. It's as if the creature inside is almost fighting back.
Yeah.
Or that's suddenly when it reverts. So they're not even expecting, say, their chest to open up or their bodies to start changing or freaking on them. Yeah, it's an interesting. You're right about the character-based part as well of this. It's interesting because you do forget in all of the flames and the fighting over like the blood and the creatures that you get, you do forget that. And I think there's more like that kind of slow burn I was talking about, that there are actually quite a few kind of character bits where it's quite that slow of just like sitting, waiting.
I think
I mean, that's still kind of, again, and that's the Carpenter minimalistic part. I mean, like, it's like Michael just appearing behind the bush, and it's like him being in the garden. It's simple. There's nothing there, but there are a lot of scenes in this where it's a lot of just sitting and staring at a body, or sitting in the snow, or like you see someone go into a building and then you don't really get, like, it's not like, oh, you're expecting something's suddenly going to happen. No, it doesn't work like that. It is very slowly placed out to kind of play into that kind of question. You're questioning almost as much as you think the characters are.
And there's going back to what you were saying about the slow paceness and the scenes of just a lot of people talking. Apparently, like the first edit of the film, John Carpenter wasn't really happy with, because he said that there was a lot of moments where it was just people talking.
Yeah,
people sat around talking, and with that you get some great moments, like when McCready's playing against the computer. The classic speech of nobody really trusts anybody and we're all very tired. That, and there are some great moments of that kind of slow pace and people sat there talking. But I mean, I love the film. I'm not going to be one of those people who shits on it by being slow in moments, because I think it's paced really well. But I think it's one of these films where it drips a lot of the things. So obviously, when I said the things, not the thing, it does both of them. But when when McCready and Dr. Cooper head off to the Norwegian base, and they see like they get the videos of obviously what had happened, and then they find the deformed corpse and that kind of stuff, and then they bring it back, and they find that it's got kind of human organs and stuff like that. I love that it sets up a lot of this stuff, because it is kind of like, but if you've watched, like I really like sci-fi, and a lot of the first times I've watched this thing, aliens had appearances. You had like my cat running. You had like grey aliens, like the classic one you always see in South Park.
Yeah.
You had like Jabba the Hutt, which is like, it looks like something,
space slug or something.
Space slug. Aliens have ways in which they look. Xenomorph, classic alien design. Whereas with this, it kind of, kind of drips in what this thing could be, you know? And I funnily enough, I saw something about the Thing's poster, the classic kind of shot of, kind of a spaceman, an astronaut or something. I don't know what you describe it as. And somebody was like, this is like one of the worst posters I've seen, in their opinion. They're allowed their opinion. But I always kind of loved that poster because it is kind of, it's kind of the film in a nutshell. It's space, it's isolation. There's not, apart from that man, there's nothing on there. And even then, it doesn't, what is that shiny? I don't know. It's just like a lure that
it's a complete, the poster itself is, I must admit, you can tell the setting, like you said, like I think you can tell that that's kind of like the big puffer like you expect to see on like a really cold climate. You can see that it kind of looks like ice, but at the same time, it also looks like this glowing light like you'd expect to see from like some alien, some UFO. But then it's completely kind of, you can't see anything, and I think that's part of that interested, like you said, with the Thing, is the fact that you don't know, there is nothing in the way, there is nothing here, there isn't a creature to put on a poster, there isn't a thing to play, and this is kind of what makes this film almost more terrifying, and it's not necessarily, yes, it's terrifying what the creature does once it's in, but it's the idea that you don't know how it could spread so easily and how it could get from person to person, and you don't know how easily. And when you're in that situation, the idea that something could just infect your blood and that's it, you're fucked. You know what I mean? You're done. Like, that's it. We are like done. It's almost scarier than there's the monster, because at least you could fight the monster. The Thing, you almost feels like you can't fight it.
No, you don't know if you are.
Like, you don't know if you are it. You don't know it, and you never know. And to be honest, even in this film, I know there's still a million theories of people who think that certain characters still were and weren't, and you know what I mean? Like from a certain point in the story, and you can see in people like with Kurt Russell, why am I blanking on his character? McCready, of course, McCready. With McCready, like how much they trust that he was or wasn't, all of these characters have this kind of sort of mystery, and it's also that kind of classic, you think of like an infection or like a blood or the like disease and stuff like that, and you always think, like, I don't know why, but you think of dying sometimes and you think it's going to be something maybe bigger. So like some attack, some battle, or some crash or something big, when the scariest thing is the idea that it could be something like as simple as freaking, I don't know, like sepsis, where you can get sepsis and literally people have died from the fact that they went on holiday, came back, and they had a shower straight after, and because mildew is built inside of it, that got in their blood, and boom, you're dead. That's scary. That's almost scary to think, like, shit, anything could kill me.
The guy who died at a staff party doing the Gangnam Style dance, you know what I mean? It's like that, isn't it? It can come in any minute.
Any minute, you can just be doing the most normal of things,
Gangnam Style,
and then you're dead.
But I mean, there's a guy called Zach Cherry on YouTube who does really interesting videos just called Who Killed Who, and he did a really cool one about Scream, and it was about obviously who was we've seen it, but he did another one about the Thing as well, and it's interesting because throughout the film there are times where you're kind of like, is this person infected? Has this person been got? And I think it's masterfully done, because not only do the characters not know, but we don't know as well, Sometimes you want to know, like the Hitchcock effect, where they say that there's a bomb under the table. We know, but the characters don't. Sometimes that's really effective, obviously, but I think the beauty of this film is that we don't know,
we never know. We like right to the very end, with McCready and Childs and things like that. You've got those two there, and you're like, we still don't definitely know that you don't have it, because, as you said, the effect doesn't really show until that point where everyone needs to know. So therefore, we never really know. We never know. And even with the end of the film, you're left on that. You're still left on that. We don't know if they're affected. We assume they'll probably die soon.
Yeah.
Maybe they won't. Maybe any minute, I don't know, McCready turns into it, starts changing, or like the body starts to fight the effect of death, and he changes into some group and just fucking kill, like wipes Charles off the earth by just tearing him apart or something. You know what I mean? You don't know with this film, and that is the brilliance though, and this is the reason why, for me, it's pretty much I haven't seen all of Carpenter's films, so I can't say
the later ones I haven't seen.
Yeah, some of the later ones I haven't. I think there might still be some of the earlier that I haven't, because a lot of people call this one it's like the Apocalypse trilogy or something, where it has the Prince of Darkness,
in the Mouth of Madness.
Yeah, those ones are all kind of considered. I've not seen Prince of Darkness or In the Mouth.
No, I haven't.
So, like, again, I don't know about, like I said, other ones. So this might be a very mainstream kind of view. But like for me, like Halloween, we know is one of my favorites of all time. But The Thing is literally up there as I like sci-fi and stuff. I love kind of thing, but I can't say there's any sci-fi horrors that I've truly like in certain ways. I love Alien and I love Predator to a certain degree. But The Thing, I just think, is just a different level for me. There's just something I love about it. And there's something that's both in Halloween and The Thing, the style that Carpenter brings to these films. There's just something that makes it more scary. The idea, he likes to play with the idea of the unknown. He likes to play with that kind of, you don't need to know the answer to that. You don't need to know where that dog came from. You don't need to know what that guy's saying. You don't need to know exactly who is or who isn't. You don't need to know what happens to these characters at the end. You don't need to know where that character's gone that second, but you're going to question it. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing with, you don't need to know what Michael Myers is or isn't. You know, you don't need to know where he is. You don't need to know his intentions. He is just that. Yeah. He's pure and simple. He's just evil. He's evil. And in this film, you know, the Thing is just that. It's just a thing. It's a thing that just is causing unimaginable, like, violence, deaths, and gruesome and playing everyone against each other. But it's just a thing. There's the shape and the thing, and it doesn't need to really be explained that much further. And it works effectively for that reason.
So I think, because obviously we're not going to go through the whole of it. I think we'll just go through our key scenes and then talk about some of the production stuff, because the production of this film is really interesting. And I think, I mean, we'll get to it when we talk about it in a little bit, but I think if it wasn't John Carpenter, we could have had a very different film on our hands.
Oh, definitely.
But I think when the scene in the kennel, for instance, where we first kind of see Dog Thing as referred to, I don't know. I always forget how kind of brutal it is. You know, when we get a lot of the dogs being dragged towards it and sucked into
it is
tendrils coming out and stuff like that.
There's such a this is like what works so well with this effect. It's almost like there's something about it where it could have just been a opening part of the wound. It could have just been a cracking of the body or the bones. It could have just been, you know, a couple of tentacles that start to come out of the creature. But instead, there's something about these things that feels like is it who made the effects for it? It's
Rob Bottin.
It's Rob Bottin, and it's off. This is one that often weirdly gets confused as Tom Savini. Tom Savini gets confused with this one. I didn't think it was, but Rob Bottin's effect, and Rob Bottin doesn't get the praise he deserves, because people confuse this and think it's similar to a Savini kind of effect. But there's just so like, let's just throw everything at it about these creatures. Let's drag the dog in. Let's almost like break the jaw. Let's have the tentacles. Let's rip a body part open. Let's really make us feel sick. You know, let's pour on, like, what is this? I think it's like KY jelly or something like that. Like, let's have that oozing and dripping out of it. Like, all of those parts just make it, and it is what makes it like an effect that you're just like, holy shit, I've never seen. But like, I don't think I've ever seen anything like it to this kind of level.
No.
Like, it feels like you expect it to stop, but it doesn't. It just keeps on pushing it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And and again, so one of these scenes alone is enough to make you be like, even if you are someone who's a bit like, oh, this is a bit slow, that scene alone is just, oh, right, okay, you've got me. Like, I did not expect that.
Yeah. And it mixes a whole bunch of stuff as well, because you have like you have a mixture of puppets,
Yeah.
a mixture of like, you know, things being controlled,
like claymation kind of version and stop motion. And...
Yeah, and what I found quite cool when looking into it is, so they, you know, they made the dog thing and it was sculpted in oil-based clay. And then the final like foam latex, and then it was operated on a raised set.
Yeah,
so it was all kind of raised up, and then they were underneath it. And apparently slime kept dripping onto the guy, so he had to wear a helmet and everything like that. And they did a lot. They did some of the slithering and the tentacles. They did that in reverse motion, which I found quite interesting.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because it does, like, it pays off incredibly, because the whole scene that's the thing. It doesn't have a set shape. It doesn't have anything. And as you see, it starts to take more things in. And by the time I think the Clark, the dog kennel guy, I think by the time he realizes what's going on, and McCready and the rest of the gang catch up, you see some dogs have like kind of been dragged into it and assimilated, and it looks so horrid, you know.
It is brutal. Does it open the little tiny? Is it the little tiny tentacles out of the mouth that starts like you just see like almost like something in its mouth, almost like
I think
coming out of its thing.
Back.
Is it its back?
I think it's its back. You see them cracking, and then the tentacles start coming out. Because the dogs start,
and it's odd as well, you know, like we said about the whole ET, like the fact, like this is literally the opposite of that. Completely. You know what I mean? This is completely anti that kind of idea of like a happy. This is the opposite of a heartwarming and happy. You know, it's literally it's bleak as can be, and it's dogs as well, which is not one that's like it's not often, you know, Carpenter has a thing for killing dogs, actually. But, but I think because he knows it plays into a kind of, like what are you doing to that kind of pet?
Well, people don't like,
creature.
Don't like seeing animals.
You don't like seeing them, but that's what I mean. It's an uncomfortable thing, but it's what works so perfectly here, because a dog who would completely get under the radar. It's like you'd be fucked if a cat came to the house. If a cat like crawled into the house and had a little thing creature or something, you know what I mean?
I'd be a similar.
You'd just be there. You'd be like stroking it on the sofa, like it's all right, give it a little treats, and then be like, it's like what's this little tentacle thing you got? Well, it starts to absorb you, and you're like,
it's a cat.
Nice. It's a cat. But you wouldn't realize, like, Carrie's snuck into the house and she's waiting for the day she can assimilate you.
She could have been assimilated already. She's looking at us like she is. You know? She's got the eyes of the dogs, so it could have been. But that you get so like we said we mentioned, but I did notice I do remember like that kind of scene, and then them looking and the autopsy kind of scene. And I do remember the kind of it's amazing how they managed to work that they do work out that whole imitation part, don't they? But it's amazing when you look at, I think when I remember looking at the scene going, wow, they have a really good knowledge of this, like considering something that would seem like it would be completely otherworldly. It seems quite like apparent, like how have they managed to do that kind of thing? But then it completely makes you question the whole thing with the film, is this idea that almost they're the ones that stand between this and destroying humanity completely kind of thing. You think of that in the story, but it's only the characters that do that. But John Carpenter never feels like he's fully pushing it that way, because it's almost like this kind of bleak, like, but for all you know, the rest of the planet's already fucked. You're on a space station. This could be like part of a bigger mass invasion, or what I mean? Because obviously they run the computer simulation, which says, within like a couple of years it could be everywhere. But for the most part, we don't. The characters don't really have any contact with the outside world, do they? And as soon as the dude realizes, I call him the dude because that's the problem with this film, is for some reason I only remember McCready's name. I don't really remember many of them for some reason, because I don't think they say their names a lot.
No, they don't. They don't. There's not a lot of them,
But the doctor, once he realizes and he starts smashing the equipment to obviously so they can't contact things, it's for like watching it back, I was like, it's kind of actually a really rational thing to do. If you're in that situation and you realize you would want to just destroy everything and be like, well,
that way
we're not going anywhere.
They have no way to get their way out, kind of thing. They have no, like, this creature can't leave this base. That's it, kind of thing. No, I think that's what is also refreshing about this film, because, like, as I said, we'll talk later about like what it could have been. But this literally, like, what it could have been with another director, but this literally could have been so easily. This could have fit into the mold of, we've got a monster, we've got a ticking clock. You know what I mean? This could easily be taken over by a different director and be like, right, we've informed the military group that there is a creature on this base, kind of thing. Instead of that whole playing into the characters and like, just, we're going to destroy the equipment, we're not getting out, we need to play with each other as characters and taking it down to a very just character to character level. Instead of making it into some bigger, which it could have been, we've run the military and we've all got this amount of time to either kill the creature or they will bomb us to this. You know what I mean? You so easily could have fallen into this mold with this film of like, it's that or we get out of here, and, you know, that whole kind of Hail Mary kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, I can imagine Michael Bay's The Thing. Like big slow-mo shots and there's a big ticking clock and they keep going to military buses going, have you killed that pig yet? And it's and Shia LaBeouf runs through like not knowing what he's doing. And a dog hunts someone's leg for no reason. Or someone slow-mos up someone's skirt for some reason.
I don't know. Michael Bay.
Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell's balls are just hanging in slow motion in your face.
Absolutely hanging. But no, I think that's it. It kind of goes in bits and pieces, doesn't it? You know.
That's why it's nice that it breaks, and it also breaks us up. With the although the character names it is weird. Like I completely get what you mean, because I forget the characters' names, but it's not like I don't recognize the individuality of the characters. They set them all up in nice, like, clear jobs and roles, or you can see what their reactions are going to be to certain things. They're all really nice like that. It's just a case of, they don't need to say their name, which, like, they don't constantly need to say their names, because that would, again, in a character, kind of almost taking it in oblique, but the Carpenter has a slight realism about him at times with certain things. And I do think there's a certain realism in the idea that we're not going to be shouting each other's names. It's like of me, every time I'm talking to you right now, it's like, Rob, you got to do this, and Rob, you got to do that. It's like, I don't need to, because we've been on a base stuck with each other. I know I'm talking to this person because most of the time they're secluded to only a few people in each room. And that's what makes it more questionable, because it's like, well, there was only two of you in that room.
Where's everybody?
One of you has it. Couldn't you both have it? Or there was only a few of you in that room. So if it can spread between one, couldn't it have assimilated with several of you? Or, could it be anything?
And there's, I mean, trying to think, there's another scene that kind of, that I think has a harrowing effect on me, and the older I get, the more I find that this scene affects me, and it's when Fuchs, I think he's one of the more rational guys, where they find his burnt corpse, and they kind of think that he must have committed suicide to kind of save himself from assimilation. And it is, I don't know, when I was young, I was like, okay, because that's the thing is, I would keep saying that's the thing. And I keep thinking like, no, not the thing. But people do, disappear and go off on their own. And the seeds of mistrust are spread quite a lot throughout this film.
You have going out to that separate, like, is it Fuchs that goes to that? When it goes to it is him who goes to this separate station, because then they have to go. That's when they have to go over later and be like, we're gonna have to go over to there. But you're like, he goes over there, you see it close the door, and then that's it. You don't see anything else. But the whole time I remember sitting there going, no one's talked about the guy that just went, or when's he going to show back up and probably be the thing. But you are thinking about him throughout the time. But but then you just find his body. He's obviously burnt himself, and it kind of, I don't know, it just brings home the kind of desperation that these people are in, where somebody knows that. I think at this point the vehicles have been damaged. The radio's been destroyed. All of the sled dogs have been killed. There's no way for them to get out. Nobody's coming to help them.
your options are basically be assimilated.
Yeah, because it's everything, isn't it? Even the health and the blood banks and stuff like
that's been destroyed at this time.
The things to protect themselves, or if they get injured to even save themselves, is like fucked.
Yeah, and it's just bleak. And then thinking that it's very rare that you have a character in a film commit suicide,
Yeah.
And I think like when it happens, it can be quite like a very strange narrative for a character to kind of have, for their story to end in that way, for them to go, well, actually, I'm in this situation where I'm not going to get, it's either I become assimilated and I spread this, I might be assimilated and I don't already know yet, or, I'm probably not going to get out of this, so I'm going to go on my terms. And I don't know, every time I watch it, I forget about it.
I remember when I watched it last time, I completely forgot what happens with that character.
Yeah,
but it also it's interesting scene because it does make you question things in a lot of different ways, because you question almost the characters. And I think you're right. The more that you see the scene, the more you might actually think about it. Or weirdly, the older you get, the more you think about like that kind of thought of what did that character think about before he decides? Did he believe he was it? But then from what we realize, they don't really recognize they are until they are. So therefore it's the idea of it. And then you even think about the situation they're in and think, well, it's quite an isolated place and not everyone's going to feel the same. They're not going to feel as a joint unit. You can tell from early on that they're a bit like frustrated with the situation that they're in and where they're stuck. And it's like, it's kind of it's a way out, but it's like, did the character think he was doing the right thing, or did the character already in that place of mind, or what I mean? There's a deepness to it with so little that you could take from this kind of these actions, and then it's brutal, and then just the idea for me, because you've heard of these things where people like burn themselves to death, like in protest. And then you hear where they've killed themselves that way and things like that. And for me, I can't imagine why anyone would even, I understand the mental health part of it. Absolutely. I just mean, I can never understand like getting to the point where I think that that's the way to do it is in my head. Like that's how dark it must be to choose that way though. Because you must think them, like you think of that room and you think you burnt yourself, I guess, because like there is a little bit of the idea that if they burn themselves, it might be more protected. Like they get this idea in their head that burning it might be the thing to stop it, kind of thing. So I think that's why that's the choice instead of because they could have just grabbed something and just stabbed it, or something like that to himself. But instead they go with that option, and the idea of burning yourself is even more, because I can't imagine anything that's probably more painful than dying that way. And just burning your body is like pretty much the most painful, one of them. Well, I think it is possibly the most painful thing that can happen to your body. Like exposing your nerves like that is just like horrible. So that's the thing that always gets me whenever I see those things. I always think, oh fuck, I cannot imagine going through that kind of pain to die.
Knowing that is unfortunately that's the best option for the situation.
Exactly, is to go that way when. It is that interesting contrast, and it's that interesting contrast with other films like, say, Alien, where when someone goes into a room like that, you almost expect that they're going into it and they're going to walk into that guy, and you don't expect to see him dead. You expect to see that he's going to become something, and you are still questioning whether his body is still going to do something. But at the same time, you're expecting it, and it's interesting because it doesn't go that way with it when it could have. Again, it could have gone for the flashier, the more disgusting kind of creature starts to come out of the body or something like that kind of part.
And then I know we get the the kind of great scene where I always find it really funny because somebody finds McCready's jacket, which is a little kind of thing even to you where you're watching, you're like, is somebody setting McCready up, or has McCready been assimilated? What's going on here? And then they don't let him in, and I don't know why, I just found it really funny when he breaks in with like a stick of dynamite. I don't know why. It's such like a serious moment, and it is that is like a massive part of the mistrust, and nobody knows anybody, and these are people who have spent a long time together, so being in that situation, you'd be like, what the fuck? But I just always find that really funny for some reason. And then
I mean, he's great in this film, Kurt Russell.
Oh yeah,
he has this kind of intimidation, this kind of thing, but he's likable and charming, while also at times like being a bit cold as well.
Yeah,
there is a kind of darkness to him. There is a bleakness to him when he's thinking. And we know that Kurt Russell can be charming. I mean, John Carpenter's worked with him several times, and he can be he is a very charming kind of actor. But it's this bleakness he brings to it, this darkness underneath it really helps to, you understand why he's kind of in charge in the situation. But you know, it's a little bit different than I think maybe people had seen previously with Kurt Russell before this film, is what I've heard from people, is that he was a little bit, you know, more of the, you know, because he'd come up in some things like TV movies and stuff like that. I think he played Elvis or something in one of the early films, like, and stuff. Like he did it like a TV movie, but he was very, because he was like a he obviously was like a TV kind of kid, known for like as a child, because he'd been in it since a child actor.
Yeah, he's a child actor.
This was completely like a changing of like giving him this opportunity to show a completely different side of him, kind of thing.
I think I forgot that, you know, earlier in the film there's another classic kind of scene to mention, and that's where we first see Bennings being assimilated, and they kind of manage to chase him outside. And he lets out that kind of horrendous scream and try and do
shriek of a
whale thing, and you see his kind of hands and fingers are all kind of elongated. So apparently the scene for that was originally supposed to be a lot different. So it was got to be that Bennings was going to be kind of pulled under the ice, and as he was kind of popping up, he would be each stage of him would be more and more kind of transformed and mutated and assimilated. But apparently it was just massively to do with, it was huge with the budget. They had to scale it back and weren't able to afford that. But I, strangely enough, whilst I would have loved to have seen that scene, because it sounds like it would have been incredible. The scene that we get of everybody stood outside as we see Bennings kind of caught mid-assimilation then getting flamethrowed and letting that scream out. There's something, I think, more terrifying about that in a way.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, instead of it being a big, again, that's what I like more about this film, is that those bigger moments only come, they're actually quite a few in a way, of the big, maybe more actiony, more epic, bigger scale effects. Quite often, a lot of the moments are much more smaller kind of moments, and I do think I prefer it much more, because you get, and again, it's that extra air of mystery, but it's also the idea that he hasn't even like majorly changed, but they know what they have to do, and it, like I think that's better in this situation, because it leads characters more, like you still see characters stood there like, what the fuck, like almost questioning it, like, should we be doing this? Because it's not just they're trying to kill the creature, it's killing their workmates, friends, whatever they are. Like it's doing that. It's killing someone because they know they have to, but at the same time going, but he still basically looks the same. Whereas if he'd completely like transformed into some bigger thing, I feel like that conflict's not there anymore. It's like, well, he's a monster. Look at him. He's a freaking monster.
So apparently that scene alone would have cost $1.5 million to make. Apparently
that's pretty much what the defibrillator scene cost. I think is
really
about 1.5 million. It's like the most expensive shot in the film.
And I think that, because earlier we didn't see that as much. Obviously, we had the dog's transformation and kind of assimilation or attempted of the other kind of sled dogs is horrid. But I think there's a point where, you know, where they're arguing, and you know, McCready's trying to kind of get back inside, and then when Norris kind of has that heart attack, we actually spoke about this in Memoriam, our favorite character deaths, I think. Because this is one of mine. Is
the Norris scene?
Yeah, it's the Norris scene, the defibrillator, because literally it's so unexpected.
It is so unexpected. You know, you've got nothing. There's not much ill will. There's a lot of characters in this film where you're like, your attention seems a bit off, or you see thing. But like again, it's Imamura, but also Norris doesn't see like he's probably the one that has the least ill will in the situation, and then suddenly it's like, but also the least unsuspected. He's kind of under the radar a bit.
There's no, I mean,
and you're like, he's having a heart attack.
There's there's no signs that he's been assimilated.
No,
there's no thought of like you get with Fuchs earlier, where he kind of disappears off on his own. You don't, as far as I'm aware, you don't really get any scenes of Norris kind of like going off on his own to places where you maybe do with other ones.
But this is also why those scenes like Fuchs and Benning and one those before being more minimal makes this so much more fucking effective. Because it's so like before this. Yes, the dog scene, the kennel scene was a little bit more of an indication of what we get here. But most of the other ones have been much smaller scale.
Yeah.
And when this one happens, because it's like just like a heart attack almost, and because of the situation they've been in, you are flown into this false sense of, well, in that situation, he probably is under so much stress, you can believe it.
Yeah.
It's the fast impact of literally like he's got to get him on the table, get that, and it's just that fast impact of as soon as the defibrillator goes to go down, but then it's about the scale of it that suddenly you're wondering what's going to happen when it. I think you are wondering what's going to happen when it's hit it, but you don't expect his chest to frickin' open up like a pair of jaws, basically, and
then just to
chomp the hands off. And it's fucking like, oh my god, like it's incredible. The effects on that is just fucking mad. The body, the way it rips open like that, on the face, and the fact that you hear that shrieking and screaming, and you see the tentacles moving and the body start to change, but especially when we start to get the Norris's head starts to,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess just going back just to the defibrillator scene.
Yeah.
I read that, it was I think they actually might have had a double amputee.
Oh yeah.
They attached prosthetics onto him and then had to pull it off for kind of more of an
graphic effect. So it still looked like real kind of parts and things like as much as it could.
And the whole scene itself kind of has. Before that, you've got this kind of confrontation with people, and I think one of the characters gets shot at this moment as well because they try and put a gun on McCready, maybe, or I don't know if that's later. But it's just so kind of, it's so sudden that you're kind of like, what the fucking hell? You've already got quite this big, this big tension there, and then this happens, and you're kind of like, oh my god, and then shit. I say after this point in the film, shit kind of really starts to hit the fan because obviously we get this.
Well, this I think, although not many, like only the audience, and again, this is why it works so well because we get this long build up to the point when they actually get to see the full force of the thing. They didn't really see the kennel, so no one saw that.
No.
We saw it. They didn't see it.
Not properly, no. I think they see the thing.
Yeah, they see like something, but they don't see the full extent of what it can do and change the body and how it can adapt to survive the way it does in this scene. They see it. They try to burn it, and it still manages to keep going on.
Yeah,
it still manages to separate itself off and turn into a freaking spider head and clamber off. And this is the first time when they see, oh my god, this is what it's capable of doing. That fucking thing survived being fucking burnt, shot out, whatever, and it's still going. And every time we take a piece off of it, it adapts and just keeps changing.
Yeah. And
like, it's never fucking, and one bit of blood could do this to any of us. So like, fuck. And that is what I think, and this is when they really start going to the whole, like, properly, like,
who could it be?
Who could it be? Which one? And this is why they start to get, like, yes, they go through chasing it through, and it kind of like gets away like at one point. But this is really what leads to that whole the classic. It's the blood scene. I think would be that's a classic. Like, this is where they're all there. Like, this is after that, isn't it?
This is after
they didn't, I was going to say they didn't. I was thinking in my head like that, but I'm sure it comes
because up until this point we've had no reason to suspect that Norris had been assimilated. And Norris isn't showing any signs of assimilation. I don't even think Norris knows he's having an assimilation.
No.
I think he has a heart attack and is like, actually genuinely having one,
Yeah.
and then it just fucking happens,
As I said, I don't believe really that any of the characters truly, unless they know that they've directly come into contact with something. I don't think any of them know, because I think that's what's the best part about it.
Yeah,
is that they have no idea, because they literally don't know. And I'm not even sure if when parts of them starts to change, that the thing even allows them to even recognize what is happening.
Maybe not. Maybe it takes over.
I feel like there is that kind of part that it literally is that kind of force that just kind of overtakes them, that they don't realize. And it is assimilate, because it is almost like a doppelganger that's been created. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's almost like a secondary, almost inside of that, but like a secondary force kind of thing. Yeah. So it is kind of the idea that maybe that character's not even there anymore. They're just doing a fake version of, like, that is the assimilation,
which is terrifying.
Yeah, when it's just a fake. It's that kind of invasion of the body snatchers kind of thing, that you've just got basically a clone of yourself there.
Yeah,
but it knows everything you say. It says everything, but in this case, it's literally happening inside of your body.
Yeah,
so it's not like they've taken you, killed you, and got another one. You're inside your body, but you're not actually you, because they've cloned you, and that whole deeper level that could go into it, that you're like, holy fuck, like, you would have no idea, or you could already be like, you're basically already dying and you don't realize that you're dying.
Yeah. But the blood sample scene is it's an incredible scene. I think the whole film is filled with amazing tense moments of atmosphere. Yeah. Just the whole film, but the blood scene itself is incredible.
Oh, this is tense. This is possibly one of the best suspense tension kind of scenes that you've got in cinema. I think. I literally think this scene is just. It's so simple.
Yeah.
But the idea that they need to test it and the blood's going to jump, and you've seen this done, and I've seen that you've seen this scene parodied.
Well, the one that springs out to me at the moment is, and I would have actually seen. I would have seen it before watching the thing. It's The Faculty,
Yeah, the Faculty
would have to take that drug.
The Faculty completely uses this scene in the best way, but then the Faculty is a very The Thing kind of style creature, isn't it? It's inspired very much by this film. But that scene where they have to suck up the drug, into their nose, and who's going to take it? Yeah, it takes it completely, but that's a great scene as well, but only because this was such a inspired way to do this scene. It could have happened in so many ways. They could have tested the blood in so many ways, but the fact is just that classic flamethrower burn the bit of wire, and as soon as I put it in, it's the blood. And it's not just the blood of the bubbling, and the fact that you're almost a bit weirded out just alone by the idea of the aspect of the blood. But then you've got the noise of the wire scratching against the instead of the inside the beak kind of part, and then you've also got that sizzling sound, and the idea of blood kind of doing that, and you're just like, oh, this is almost something bad, especially that scratching noise. I feel like that gets to anyone. It's just sounds like it's going to bone, in your mind, just
So when I was at work, maybe 6 months ago or something like that, and I was in one of our meetings, and we were having loads of COVID outbreaks at work. And they were saying, they're sometimes people aren't showing symptoms and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, what we should do is every day everybody gets in the room and we all do a COVID test. And I was like, and it'll be like The Thing. We can see who is there. And only one person laughed. Went over the rest of the people's head, and I was like, what are we doing here? But I just think, and the simple fact that I think the beauty of the blood scene is that we don't know who's been infected, assimilated. Now we've had, the shock of kind of not seeing Nora, of not knowing that Norris was even taken over, and that some of the characters don't even know if they're infected or not. You see it when McCready's testing some of their blood. They look tense, and you're thinking it will be a tense situation, but if you knew that you weren't infected, you'd probably be like, it'll be fine. But
it's the shots. You've got all of the men, and you can see their eyes are gripped onto that thing. They're all just there. Not only that, on top of it, you've got a flamethrower there, so you're literally like, okay, if anything goes wrong here, someone's basically just going to burn my ass straight away. Someone's getting cooked straight away. and all of that kind of part of the scene, and like just that, and the music also has a nice kind of like the tension of kind of it's very minimal, but again, it's so well done. That scene.
And then obviously we have the reveal that Palmer is the thing, and I think that what is also gross about this film is that he's tied to the people as well.
So you're
kind of thinking, if these people close to him, and then I love because the tentacles start coming out of him, but then his it kind of grips onto to Windows, who up to this point I liked the Windows character. I think in a horror film you kind of mostly know that a lot of the characters are going to die, but he's one of the characters I was like, okay, maybe he's going to go a bit longer, but then he gets the tendrils wrapped around him, and then the head splitting open, biting into him and eating him. It's just I think it's just another really creative kind of creature.
It adds on to that. Like, they're already isolated, but there's a way that we continue to trap them, but not in just a boring like they're cornered or something like that. We trap them by the characters' actions. They almost trap themselves. You know what I mean? What they do is almost what leads sometimes to their downfall, is because they do things that were for protection, and it actually makes things worse at times. Like all of those things.
And then I think we get, we kind of go to the next bit after he kind of kills them all. And then this is where I know where Childs kind of disappears. And I know obviously Childs is one of the surviving characters at the end. And this is a big part of where people think that Childs may potentially be the thing, may potentially be assimilated, is because, I think he's left to guard Blair, who we do find out is one of the things. But he's escaped, and when they come back, Childs is missing, and the power generator's destroyed. One thing that I do kind of love in this film is that they do find it's building a flying saucer, it's building an escape thing. And I always think that it's quite interesting, side like little stories that I play D&D, and I'm running a game at the moment. And one of the interesting things that I've learned to do is that not every bad guy has to fight to the death, sometimes if they take a beating, they've got to retreat, and I love the idea that the thing knows that it's been caught, and it knows it's being found, and it knows it's got to be tracked down. So it tries to escape and go and hibernate and wait these people out, And I love that it's like a design choice, because it could have been that, once, Blair, once it's escaped, you think, okay, maybe now that the thing is kind of been revealed a bit, we're not going to have as much intrigue. We're going to have it hunting them
fully
down, out, But instead we get the thing still trying to hide and still trying to actually escape.
It is. It's again. It is it is literally the classic. Even when it's revealed, it's still the classic Jaws, basically. Even when it's revealed, we're still not getting actually huge full shots, and we're still not getting. Yes, we're getting people turning into things and things like that, but it's still kept to a level. It's not full on like now. Again, another director, the choice of this could have suddenly become that big creature chases them down a hole, chases them through Norris's body transforms into that, and then literally is like, trying to escape and shoot at this giant creature that's now chasing them through the holes. And that kind of horror movie, that kind of sci-fi film where you've literally just got the creature and it's just coming after them like some kind of giant blob or creature, or there's some terrible ones.
I love the end of the film, but the faculty, it turns it to a giant monster. I always remember Elijah Wood running through the bleachers or whatever.
As they're closing, and you've got them like chasing you through, and like the swimming pool and all that kind of it does. Like that one definitely goes in that direction of like we're going to turn it into a big like monster mash. And maybe if they'd had more budget, maybe something like that might have happened. But again, in history we have good things that happen because luckily budget got in the way, which sometimes is not great, because nowadays when you haven't got budget, we end up with terrible CGI scenes and like try to shoot home. But back then, it just meant they had to be more creative with the practical effects that they had.
Yeah.
And it led to this kind of amazing parts.
Yeah.
Because you get like that whole scene where they're basically under the bottom beneath the base, aren't they? And that's what you like, the way they found the space stations and that, and they have all of the where they tried to blow it up and fighting back and like that kind of part, which is like interesting. And I know that in that part, didn't Kurt Russell almost kill himself in that? Have you heard that one about with like the dynamite and things like that?
No,
I
haven't heard that one actually.
You said earlier about using the dynamite for that, but they used dynamite then to like kind of throw and make it explode, like to try and blow it up at the bottom. And Kurt Russell apparently didn't quite think about the fact that they was using real one, and he didn't move within a distance of it, so he threw it, but he didn't move. So he kind of stayed within distance of it, thinking it wouldn't be as bad as it was, and was thinking it was like prop explosion, not real explosion. It was real, and he literally got blew off of his feet backwards, like in a proper kind of movie style. He got flung across like the room. Luckily, because as you can see in the set, it's kind of it's kind of like an open kind of ground kind of thing, as if it's been dug kind of thing. So luckily he was kind of thrown across onto something. If it had been like a room, then he might not have been so lucky, that was full of stuff. He might have been so lucky, but he was literally just thrown basically onto like a dirt patch, basically. So he was lucky, but no, Kurt Russell almost died on the set of the thing that day.
That would have been horrid.
That would have been a bad way.
Yeah. And then obviously, we have the Blair thing kind of transforms. We do get a transformation to kind of a giant creature, but it looks so beautiful and it looks so horrid.
It does, yeah.
It's hard to describe them, what some of them look like, because it is kind of just so. I think one of the things which is great is that John Carpenter, when speaking to Rob Bottin about what he wanted the effects to look like, he said he didn't want it to be just like a guy in a suit.
Yeah,
which is great, because a lot of these.
Well, that's what the original was, basically. Yeah. So it's interesting that, like, because I know John Carpenter said that he had a huge love of this film. That's why it's in the original Halloween. Yeah. You see the film. I know he had a huge love of that kind of thing, but it's interesting that John Carpenter, when he thinks of making a film, he's more thinking of, that part of the idea is a really cool way to do this.
Yeah.
Not thinking of, I just want to remake the same film.
Yeah.
Like, which is, again, this is why it's seen as one of the best remakes, because the best remakes reinvent it in some way. They change it up. The ones that have been good have been ones that kind of mess with the formula a little bit. Like, they still honor the original kind of idea, the kind of, like in this one, say the setting and stuff like that's still there, but he twists it into a new kind of way of showing it, kind of thing. Like some of the remake ones that we prefer, for instance, like say Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the remake kind of thing. Like, yes, some people probably don't like that one, but I think what makes it better is the fact it's not just trying to be the original psychological thriller. It tries to be more of a kind of down and dirty, kind of gritty kind of version. And it's different enough that it makes you feel like I'm not just watching a film I could have just watched.
Kind of fresh.
Whereas the worst horror remakes are the ones that basically do the same thing.
Yeah.
But sometimes ones that take it in a different direction can be just as poor.
Oh, yeah. Always.
There are many of those examples as well.
And then he throws the dynamite, blows the station up, and then we get the classic bit where kind of Charles returns and says that he kind of got lost in the storm, and then obviously they kind of distrust each other and share a bottle of whiskey, and this is, I think, where a lot of the theories about the ending kind of come in, and the thing that I love is that we don't get, we don't find out who it is. Yeah, we don't know. Apparently there was I don't know, they made an ending, or they were considering making an ending where
an alternate ending,
where Kurt Russell survives.
Yeah,
because a lot of the test audiences said that it was extremely bleak, and it is. But I kind of love that, because We don't know if these
bleak
characters
ambiguous is way better. Is way better for this film, which is a whole film which is kind of bleak and ambiguous.
Yeah,
It works with the film. If we suddenly had Kurt Russell getting into a helicopter, like I'm alive, like kind of thing, it totally wouldn't have worked the same way it does in this. The fact that we're just basically leaving, we basically just leave the characters, don't we?
We just leave them.
Yeah, we just leave them. They're there. That's it. Like, and I know for some people, yes, they wouldn't see, but this is why this film is seen as great now and maybe not at the time, because it wasn't what people were expecting. It was completely different than the expectation of what they were getting.
Yeah.
And yes, and maybe it was a point when the idea of a bleak, ambiguous ending seemed a bit of a strange concept. But, but that is what works because the whole film is this.
Yeah.
If we had one of the characters, if we had child getting away or, things like that, even the opposite. And if we had a child suddenly, I don't know, so it suddenly bursts out, a tentacle suddenly burst out of his chest and pull McCready in or something like that kind of shock ending. Again, even that would have just ruined the whole effect because throughout the film, there are just these scenes that are just, and that scene is very much that of, we're just sat here, we're drinking, we're thing. Or we're just sat in our workroom with all the other staff we're just here because this is isolation. It's cold, it's damp, it's a bit boring, but that is the real effect. And this is real. This ending feels real. Whereas it's not some shock jump or it's not some, and then out of nowhere, the helicopter appears and they jump in. It's like, it doesn't, because that it doesn't make sense with the rest of the story. It doesn't work.
So I don't know if you want to talk about some of the things about who might be what.
Oh, I was just going to say about what the alternate ending was.
We'll say about that and then I'll say.
So like we said, spare, have the spare one because they said it was so bleak. They filmed in a different scene where, so the actual scene was McCready he's rescued and appears in a room where he's given a blood test to determine whether he's been assimilated. So we've given another blood test. Yeah. Which he passes. Fortunately for fans, so basically, fortunately, he so the ending basically would have been like it's positive, it's negative. Yeah. He's safe. So we definitively know that he is not that. Yeah. And again, I understand that for the fears, because I know that John Carpenter had a lot of fears about this film. He had fears that they were going to think the special effects were goofy and stupid looking. Like he didn't have complete faith all the time. Bottin was very much like, this is like some of my best work. Yeah. Carpenter was looking at some of it going, is this too goofy? A head coming off, the tongue jumping across the room. Yeah. Is it too an audience not going to like it? They're going to basically laugh at my creation here. And that's terrible. Like he's very was insecure in that kind of way about this film, because it was a little bit different. He was handing over reins that he didn't do with other things. Music was one of them. He handed things over because he saw this more of his big tentpole film, not his smaller projects he'd made before, which were basically all his and his wife perfect thing, their projects. Whereas this was almost him thinking, this is how I become a bigger director by doing this. And again, surprising that it didn't turn out that way, because I literally would have always thought that this was a hit. But, I was completely surprised. But it's definitely interesting, with say that alternate ending, that I'm glad they didn't give in to the idea of the studio being like, oh no, that's a bit bleak. Can we just say that he's alive? Yeah. Because I don't think this film would be seen the same way if we had that scene on the end. No, not as quite. If it, went off, tested, I'm fine. And it sounds like a crap ending. I mean, I've not seen I don't know if there's any footage of it out there, but the way it's described just sounds so like, okay, so he survived, we get to see him survive, and we get to see him in some kind of room, and there he is, and he's negative, and that's the end of the film. It's like that almost sounds more kind of like, okay, that's it, is it? That's how we ended this. Whereas two friends drinking a bottle of whiskey and sat in the snow, and as we kind of pan out is that kind of word. Both sat there I'm going to sit here all night basically until one of us dies. Yeah, but that's it. I'm still not trusting you. Yeah, I still don't quite trust you. It's okay. I mean, they still share a bottle of whiskey there, so it's a kind of weird. I don't trust you, but I'm going to pass possible fluids that could infect.
Well, that's one of the theories. So obviously the first kind of theory I touched on earlier when I said that Charles goes missing.
Yeah.
So one of the ideas is that Charles disappears whilst MacReady and the others went to place the explosives. And it does state that MacReady is also kind of goes missing long enough to be assimilated.
Yeah.
But the main difference is that obviously he passes the blood test. And Charles passes, but he disappears for quite a long time after.
And there's no check after that.
There's no check after that. There's a theory that Charles, when he appears at the end, is apparently looking to wear a new set of clothes than he was wearing. Evidence that he has been assimilated, but it's not quite clear because he's covered in frost at the end, so nobody really knows. The whiskey is so. With the ending shot, when Kurt Russell is speaking, we see breath coming out of him. However, when Charles is speaking, there's no breath coming out of him, or we can't see any. Apparently, this doesn't hold water because you can see it if you properly look. That was never an intentional thing. I think it's just what happened during filming. And then the idea is that the bottle that MacReady passes to Charles wasn't actually whiskey, was filled with gasoline. And when he drinks it without realizing, and then MacReady smiles and laughs, it's kind of speculation because, there's no evidence of what's in there. But it's also that they kind of think that the idea is that the thing wouldn't know what whiskey tastes like, or gasoline
they
tastes
wouldn't
like.
understand. Wouldn't recognize that.
Would have recognized it.
So wouldn't notice something like that.
So that's a potential theory. And then there's one which I haven't really heard so much, and it's called the eye light theory. And it states that humans were marked with a light in their eyes by the film's director of photography, Dean Cunliffe. And at the end of the film, Charles does not have the eye light, and MacReady does. However, Cundy went on to say that, it was used early in the film, but then was actually abandoned at the end under direction of John Carpenter, who wanted to keep it vague. And then, apparently Carper has said that one of them had been assimilated, but the only certain thing is that MacReady and Charles' fates are sealed. And I don't think, I know in that article I was reading then, it does say that, Carpenter said that one's been assimilated, but I think he's always kind of kept his hands close to his chest and has kind of said, well, actually, the interpretation is up to the people.
Yeah. Which is the best to be left, and it's the best and most interesting way to leave it. Because there are points where either of them could be, where even MacReady, where he's got close enough to things where you don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
Where there are certain scenes where he just, even just for moments, you don't quite see him. You see something else instead. There are plenty of moments, as we say, all the way back to Norris, where we had no idea he would have got even anywhere near or had a chance of that. You know what I mean? So Charles, I can definitely remember watching and suspecting that Charles was, and I was almost expecting something with Charles to happen, that kind of thing, because that's the expectation. But again, I prefer that there wasn't one and there wasn't anything that happened. And I think, I can see it with Charles, especially those little parts, because it's just such an extended scene we don't see him for.
Yeah,
you're like, where the fuck were you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's fun. It's fun to speculate.
It is.
It's fun to work it out, It's fun to work out, and the actors are fantastic in the scene as well.
Yeah,
Keith David is great.
Keith David's the man.
Yeah.
So apparently there were a lot of people in consideration for the role of that Keith David ultimately took on of Charles. I don't know if did you ever hear of the people who were potentially in the contention for the running?
For actor.
The actor.
Actors, no. No, I don't think I have. I've heard other directors that were talked about for the film, but I haven't heard actors.
Yeah, so originally, they were looking at Jeffrey Holder, Carl Weathers, which is an interesting one. Bernie Casey. He was looking at Isaac Hayes at one point, because obviously he worked with him on Escape from New York. And then Ernie Hudson was also in contention as well. before they ultimately kind of met Keith David and then settled on him. And there was some also kind of weird people that they wanted into it. So originally Carpenter wanted to have Donald Pleasance in it before he'd be kind of too recognizable to cast. There were a couple of people he wanted to do. I don't know if you heard this, but Universal brought in some comedians to try and be in it and to try and balance out the film and, in terms of that. And one of them was Jay Leno, which is a really interesting one.
Yeah, I could not imagine. Yeah, that because even Keith David's actually somewhat, I believe, of a comic and a kind of thing like that. But it's interesting though. A lot of the men, especially for Charles that you mentioned, there they're all actors who we know really well and have had iconic roles. And I'd say all Ernie Hudson, Keith David, Carl Weathers. But they're also all hugely underrated actors. Yeah, they've been in big roles and things like that. But you don't see them in nearly enough. Like they should have been far bigger stars than they actually ended up being.
Yeah, definitely.
I got if I say, for instance, I love Arnold Schwarzenegger and he is what he is, but he ain't a great actor. Whereas Carl Weathers actually is a very good actor.
Yeah, Carl Weathers.
Keith David is a very good actor. Kurt Russell is much more well known than him, but Keith David has always been underrated. He had a long period where he was in lower kind of comedies and stuff like that. In recent years, he's come back up in kind of a rise. But again, hugely underrated. John Carpenter had a proper eye for some of the actors that just, deserved a better shot than they've had.
Ernie
Hudson, the
underrated Ghostbuster. And even Kurt Russell was involved in the production before being cast, but he was actually the last member to be cast. And this is quite interesting because some of the actors who were originally thought about being playing MacReady.
Yeah.
One was Christopher Walken, which when I think of Christopher Walken now, I do laugh because of the memes. I can't get past certain
characters' mannerisms, the voice, and Christopher Walken. Christopher Walken's a great actor.
He's incredible. Loads of stuff.
That's what I mean. Deer Hunter, Christopher Walken, and suddenly you got a damn good. But if you're thinking I don't know, Christopher Walken in Click or Hairspray or something, you know what I mean? You're later Christopher Walken, and not that he still can't do great performances, but he did kind of get. Christopher Walken is like Nicolas Cage, or like.
I'd have him more like De Niro or Pacino. Yeah, they did a lot more amazing roles. Yeah, and then it seemed to be as they got a lot older, they started to do these kind of weird comedy roles.
What I mean more the Nicolas Cage one is more that you've got De Niro and Pacino though was still they could do stupid roles, but they could still get into proper dramatic at the same time. They can still do both. So can Christopher Walken, but Christopher Walken had this kind of zany craziness. His voice had been imitated so many times, like Nicolas Cage, that you kind of get this kind of people got to a point when you almost can't take him seriously. Whereas I'd say De Niro, he can do a million crappy films, but you could still, he gets enough good meaty role and you still take him fully seriously. Yeah. Whereas Walken, I think sometimes now you can watch him in things and still not completely take him the same way anymore. You got so used to the imitation.
It's unfortunate. Another one was Jeff Bridges, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And then another strong early one before they decided to go for our boy Kurt Russell. And he had worked with John Carpenter.
Yeah.
He's got a big old piece of pipe on him. He fucks like it's going out of style. I suspect the only reason they didn't cast him in this film is because there's no women in this film for him to fuck.
Oh.
Guess.
We are talking about I'm blanking on his name. I'm like, is it Dan? No, it's not Dan.
That's the character he plays.
That's what I mean. I remember his character name. Oh, I can't remember his name. Why is it? I know this guy.
You know him.
I know him. I just can't remember his name. What's his name?
Tom Atkins.
Tom Atkins. There
Tom
we
Atkins,
go.
which is,
I was thinking of Dan from Hello.
Dan.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah.
I was like, Tom Atkins. Tom
a patron saint of Cast Me to Hell. But yeah, and that's I think that's a bit of a.
It's interesting. Out of those, Jeff Bridges, I think could have worked just as well as.
Yeah,
he has that same kind of style as Kurt Russell, and he's very good with oblique. Christopher Walken would have been, but I just don't think is the leading guy. Christopher Walken's almost better as the mad side guy. And Tom Atkins, I mean, you just wouldn't get anything done.
No, you wouldn't, man.
He'd probably have started turning on the guys.
He would have, man.
It would have been more like more of a test of who's managed to get gonorrhea from Tom Atkins. And doing the same test, the blood test, but with shit. John Carpenter's got it.
John Carpenter.
Tom Atkins made his way in.
He's fucked everyone.
He is the thing. Tom Atkins.
The thing is his cock. and the cover's exactly the same. It's just a 12-inch pipe.
Because when you first said about the big pipe and stuff, I was like, he'd already worked with him. I was like, oh no, that came afterwards. But I was thinking of They Live.
Rowdy Roddy
Piper. Yeah. And when you said about the big pipe, I was like, oh, Rowdy Roddy Piper was going to be in the thing.
Yeah,
but that was later. Wasn't it?
Okay. But yeah, do you want to talk about who was originally, or the production of it? Now we spoke about some of the casting.
Well, it's all the way back in the. It didn't get made, and we didn't get the release until '82, but it was all the way back in the early set. I think '72. I think about 10 years prior. It took 10 years to get to the screen because they wanted to make a remake of the Thing from Another World. They were at the stage when they were making. We were getting we were getting like remakes of, say, Godzilla and the Blob, and they were kind of bringing back those kind of horror monsters to like a revitalized kind of thing. And the Thing came across their radar and they wanted to do it. I believe John Carpenter did have an early conversation with them, actually, but he wasn't big enough for them to hire him to be the director of this. He hadn't got enough cred yet. He was still too low mainstream. So they went to Tobe Hooper. Which,
obviously, if you listen to our last episode, celebrating the 40th anniversary of Poltergeist, we do love Tobe Hooper.
We do love him. And he's got a
see.
style. I mean, even in Poltergeist itself, there was a creepy kind of tension kind of style there. And, and we know with Texas Chainsaw Massacre that, he could probably pull it off. It's because obviously Texas Chainsaw came before Halloween. Yeah. That's why he got into the radar. It seems they were looking at kind of lower indie directors to make a horror one. They were looking at horror directors, but they weren't. They wanted someone who could have a pull, and with Tobe Hooper they could use. But I think Tobe Hooper, he's a little bit left. He's a little bit different, a little bit like there's been lots of people that talk about him and say that his ideas are a little bit strange, a little bit off sometimes. He likes his social commentary. He likes his even people take with like when we said about Poltergeist and the reason like whose is it and things like that. It's very much down to the whole. Some people say that Poltergeist ended up, although the ideas were there of his, he kind of did it because he thought it might lead to him being able to do more of his own kind of projects. He was almost doing it as a light thing. And some people even say like he'd missed out on projects like this because people had seen him in like Texas Chainsaw, but his ideas were a bit too out there at the time. He was trying too much to be like, I'm the different kind of person, and studios just couldn't quite get along with his visions. So he kept, because I believe Tobe Hooper is on a list of several different like films that he has missed out on because they brought him in and then went, this guy scares me. This guy is like that. So then they looked at John Landis,
which again,
American Werewolf. So there you go. You're basically looking at all of the horror films around that time that had John Landis. John Landis, as we've talked about before, he hasn't. And we've talked about the fact that he hasn't made that many of the films, but American Werewolves does have an absolutely amazing transformation scenes and things like that. Yeah. But at that stage, we have no idea if that's even what the concept was.
No, we don't.
Because it was a remake of the original, which is more of a large alien creature that's coming after them, kind of thing. Like it just looks like a very large like man in the original. This kind of odd shit, you can't quite work it out, but what it is, it kind of looks like this.
It's a lot more humanoid.
Yeah, it is much more human. So we don't even know if that's what they were looking at. A lot of people say that the translation came from conversations with Walken and Carpenter to create this weird design. Instead of it being, and Carpenter was very much the one that had the vision of it not being a human kind of character. So we don't know what Landis's vision would have been, but apparently it didn't work out with those two characters, like the characters, those two characters, those two crazy characters, Tobe and Landis. I have seen lots of things that have said that they jumped around and there was conversations with a range of different directors. They did not Spielberg or anything. They did say lower, but they did go to people. I believe Joe Dante was in the mix as well at one point. And people who just directed several kind of more indie horrors around that time, who I can't name because they sadly didn't end up being as big as, they've done one horror at a time.
Well,
but
I just actually looked.
Carpenter makes,
well, I actually just looked, and because I couldn't find much about the concept. And I think they were relatively
Hooper's concept. Yeah,
Hooper's concept.
I heard it was.
Apparently, it was. It was supposed to be
failed kind of attempts. They did try to change it and mix it up, but the studio just didn't like it. Version.
So there was, an interview with the Thing's co-producer Stuart Cohen, who was a friend of Carpenter. And he wrote a blog called The Original Fan, and apparently they didn't really take on the core themes of Who Goes There, and that the process of assimilation and how it works would be difficult to dramatize. So they came up with their own take, and Cohen described it as a pitch of an Antarctica Moby Dick, centered around a character dubbed the Captain hunting a large non-shape-shifting alien. They went on to describe it as being dense, humorless, and almost penetrable. That's how Cohen kind of described the take.
This is Hooper's, just to be clear. This is Hooper's idea.
Yeah. And then obviously, like you said, they tried to get John Landis on. I would have been interested to see John Landis's concept of the
John Landis's would have been as well. It is interesting, but John Landis has always had a kind of humor to his versions. And this I'm not saying that this has no humor. It's not completely in that way, but it's mainly quite bleak and dark and minimal. Whereas Landis can sometimes be a little bit bigger, a little bit more humor, like a little bit,
a bit tongue in cheek.
It kind of makes me think as if Sam Raimi had tried to do this as well. Like Landis and Raimi always come into a similar category of me in my mind.
Yeah,
and therefore again, it wouldn't have been the same film at all. And that Hooper description even proves even more that you could have taken this idea in a very a different direction that sounded very different, but it didn't sound like a film that would have been a big hit. Like the idea that they were just hunting a bigger creature again, and the idea of it just what makes this stand the test of time almost it is that the bleakness, the ambiguousness, and that design of the creature. That idea, that concept of how to create the creature is what makes it stand out, because it kind of almost hadn't been done like this before. I know the Blob is obviously one thing I think in my mind of something that kind of changes and things like that, but not in this kind of way of it's kind of in your blood, it's kind of moving it constantly. You have no way of controlling it.
No.
Like this is what kind of made this completely different and stand on its own. This is what makes it almost, if we were doing original versus remake, and I know we're not very versed like the original. Have you seen the original?
No, I've seen the original. I've seen bits.
I've seen it like a while ago. But this is what makes it stand out almost. This is what makes it almost not as comparable, because all it has is a setting, basically. The rest of it is a completely different concept for a film. This is a psychological, bleak, ambiguous kind of film that literally just makes you question if you're a thing.
Yeah.
You're by the end going like, you're thinking, do I test myself?
Yeah.
It is so interesting. But then to go back to the director anyway, John Carpenter, obviously, then he got his big hitter with Halloween. And then they went, yeah, you can do it. But it's nice because although lots of directors have said, I know like Scorsese says this is one of the greatest, the original is one of the greatest films ever made. It was Howard Hawks. That's who it was. Howard Hawks made it, and he was a huge like acclaimed director. He was also a complete basket case. He was mad. He had OCD. He had severe OCD. Like he literally boxed himself up in he was like a millionaire, like rich as hell, had casinos, had things. He was a director, but he was also like a millionaire. There's a film called The Aviator about him.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Leonardo DiCaprio played him. And he literally got to a point in his life, like when he was making films, where he got so obsessive. Like he was the one that kind of brought him with like the color and stuff like that and things like that. But he also worked in black and white, so it was kind of a changeover. It didn't quite work for him, like when sound came in and stuff like that. But he like boxed himself into a room, like piss jars full of like he literally had stacks of piss jars, and he basically just kept himself, while he was editing one of his films, he just kept on doing it and basically drove himself mad to the point where he got so severe that like he just crumbled, his empire crumbled around him. So that's the mad history that comes with it. But Carpenter had shown before, it's the reason it's in Halloween, but he said he had a deep love, like this was his passion project. When he became a director, the idea of getting to do something like The Thing or even recreate The Thing had always been something that he'd loved and got to do. And you completely see that passion. Like Carpenter is, we've talked about music and soundtrack and suspense with all like his films, and he has a great style. And, that was much more apparent early on than I'd say later as we go. But he was never, it seemed like he was never quite as focused as he was from what I've seen and people have said about this film.
Yeah.
Like he seemed so on point and focused to know what he wanted to create. Even if he was a bit insecure, he still decided to fully create his vision for what this film would be. And he almost later, because he always had this kind of insecurity, later is where people kind of said like he got a little bit more insecure about how to approach certain things.
Yeah.
And that's where it started to kind of fall apart. He got too worried about what the audience would think.
Yeah.
And almost why people have said like some of the stuff he's done in later years, or the stuff he's done like in like books or his music and stuff like that in later years, is almost because he's got to the age where he's like, fuck it, I don't give a shit. Yeah. Whereas he was still stuck in this kind of almost worried about what people were going to think about his films, and that changed his decisions, and that almost changed The Thing.
Yeah.
And thank God it didn't. 40 years later, and it still freaking stands up as like masterpiece of horror.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess he's always been, you know, a filmmaker, hasn't he?
Yeah.
But I think, and recently, you know, we're very lucky that horror films are kind of being considered a lot better. I'm gonna sneeze.
Yeah.
So sorry. But I always felt that kind of, unfortunately, John Carpenter got a bit hard done by, you know, because obviously Halloween's a massive smash success. But then you had things like Escape from New York, The Fog, and whilst I think, you know, they made money and they were, you know, quite well received, they never quite reached those levels. And then obviously, I mean, you had The Thing. I think there's like a 4-year period or something like that where I think he genuinely might have one of the best kind of, you know, outputs there is. I'm just going to try and find it now, but obviously, so for, you know, 19 like 80, he did The Fog, 81 Escape from New York, 82 The Thing, 83 Christine. You know, so in 3 years he did some absolutely incredible films, and then obviously Big Trouble in Little China, Prince of Darkness, They Live, and I always felt that he kind of got a bit people at the time didn't appreciate him almost, you know.
Like he had a lot of sadly like ones that flopped.
Yeah,
as if people didn't quite get it, and it seems now in later years people have got much bigger appreciation of what he did, what he did for horror, what he did in general for like, you know, even for action and things like that. Like some of his films were like big horror chat, but yeah, you know, you're completely right that sadly he should have been a director like Spielberg. got the opportunity to do whatever the fuck he wants, but he didn't. He got to the point when studios stopped giving money, stopped.
It's unfortunate
being that, stopped getting that flop, and it's sad. And then that's why he again had to be a bit more like, and he didn't get the option to do basically like a Spielberg who gets to do whatever the fuck he wants and can do it his way.
Yeah,
because some of his films stopped making money, and I guess at the end of the day, it's a business. Yeah, that's fine. But sadly, because it went like that, I think that's what links with the whole. He had to start thinking more about what the studio wanted, or he didn't, but he wouldn't have the budget to make it. So if he wanted to make it his way, he had to do it independently. And sometimes that also didn't work for him because he didn't have the stuff to create his vision that he wanted, and it is sad. He definitely seems mistreated. It's nice that actually in the last few years that we seem to have had a bit of a resurgence of Carpenter, that people are truly appreciating what he is, what he can do. And we've got more places that saying that he's doing stuff, he's helping with things. Part of it is also like he seemed to have a little bit of a reluctance to join in with certain things like that. It's like Halloween, like he didn't want to come back for that kind of era. He long pushed it away, like kind of thing. Like, no, I'm going to distance myself from this. He didn't want that, but since he's come back with it now, he seems to have a bit more open, and he's even majorly involved in.
He's doing the music and stuff. Yeah,
the new thing.
The
film that they're making. Blumhouse is making a new one. And Carpenter's part of
a remake, a sequel.
I think it's I don't know. I think it's a continuation of some form. I think it's or a different story told within the Thing universe. I think that's the plan, but I believe he's producer on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he's actually properly involved. Like he's producer and talking through story ideas and stuff like that. So he said they've got a new idea for it.
Yeah. Okay.
Whatever that is, I don't know. Yeah, God knows what it is. McCready.
Yeah.
40 years later.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess we'll see, won't we? But just before we end up, we'll take a short trip, unless you've got anything else to add.
I'm good. I'm happy.
We'll take a short trip over to the social media lounge, as we always do. I think when we say the social media lounge, it should like cut to one of us in like Sky Sports, like booth or something like that, like Match of the Day style.
Completely different place. Like here I am on scene. I literally thought you were going to say it should cut to us. I was like, I don't know how you do this over radio, but it should cut to us in like a kind of sexual position.
Maybe like the listeners now imagine us in a sexual position, not together,
or in like a full on like I don't know, like
suit
kind of.
Yeah, we could wear suits for it. So I basically put out about it, and I put out whether it was John Carpenter's finest work. So JM said first saw it about when they were about 8. Watched it with my dad on VHS, and he thought it would scare me, but I was fascinated by the big teeth chomping off hands and the head dragging itself away. My second favorite film ever. Adored the atmosphere and the cleverly constructed tension. Dug a little deeper, and her favorite film is The Shining. Absolute classic. I'm probably going to butcher this name, so I'm sorry. But Karen Madarasi Whalen, one of the best horror movies of all time. The head to spider scene freaks me out to this day. And then Bob Scott, who was one of the winners of our first ever competition. So definitely not Carpenter's best movie for me. First time I saw it must have been in the 90s, and I was thoroughly underwhelmed. Rewatched it for the first time since then a few years ago and thought it was pretty good. Currently top 5 Carpenter. So general consensus is that it's a well-loved and well-received film.
Yeah. It is interesting that a few people I don't know. It is interesting that a few people are not quite as taken with it. Like, and I completely get that. I get like some ways in which it's not, and it's definitely not going to be to everyone's taste in that style. But it's definitely not a film that I expected to like as much as I do.
Yeah.
Like I expect, like when I hear about it, when I looked at it, and maybe even the first time, but when I got to be honest, I don't think I remember being completely like, I was drawn to it the first time.
Yeah.
The second time with this film was the one when you really think about it, when you really look into it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not about that big twist ending or things like that. It's almost like literally, and I feel like when you watch it again, you forget who is it.
Yeah, no, that's it.
But you slightly forget that, but also it's just you're more drawn into the whole thing when you've almost seen it through once before. When you know what kind of film it is, then that. So I definitely say to people, if you haven't, like if you've watched it once and kind of pushed it off, give it another go.
Yeah, definitely.
Revisit it on its 40th year.
Yeah. Well, as always, we hope you've enjoyed the episode. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button so you get the next episode as soon as it's released. And if you could, please leave us a lovely review. And until then, we will see you soon. Goodbye, stay safe, and don't get assimilated, and test your blood. Bye-bye.